Hi, and welcome to Alive with Chronic Illness, a podcast dedicated to exploring what it's like to live with and not in spite of chronic illness. Today I'm joined by Franchise Strategist Stacey Cann, who shares her experience of parenting and working with chronic illness. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stacey. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Stacey Cann. I am a franchise strategist, mum of three, and I have 3 chronic illnesses.
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your chronic illnesses?
Yeah, sure. So we've kind of joked that I collect them these days. It's kind of gotten a bit like that with life. You have to see the funny side, don't you? But my first introduction to chronic illness really was about 15 years ago, where I just had an awful lot of pain, and they actually thought that it was a rumbling appendix, and it absolutely was not a rumbling appendix. So various tests and consultants and digging around later, it turned out actually to be ulcerative colitis, so bowel disease. And they sat me down and they explained that there was no cure. I would manage this for the rest of my life and have to take tablets for the rest of my life. And that was pretty much all they told me, which was quite scary back then. And then along the way, the colitis and the treatment for my colitis has then unfortunately caused a bit of a knock-on effect in my body. And very recently, actually, only in the last couple of years, we've also discovered that kind of the knock-on from the medication has caused issues and complications with my liver. And I now have 2 rare liver diseases to add to that collection. So it's been quite a progressive journey with the chronic illness. And at times I felt really like able and like take on the world and like this isn't going to stop me. And then like unpredictably, the world comes crashing down. I'm in hospital for a week and life is tipped on its head. So it's had a massive impact on my life compared to that 15 years ago when they're like, oh, it's just this thing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and it turns out to not be just this thing, and it's something to worry about.
Absolutely, it really is. And the impact as I've gotten older, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, but like the impact of like the hospital visits and the time it takes out of life, and I'm preaching to the converted here really, but like it is that kind of the impact just seems to get greater and greater and greater, particularly since like having the kids and kind of family life. So yeah.
Yeah, and you did touch on that. So you're a mum of 3 children. So that was after your diagnosis.
Yeah, so I had worked really hard before having kids to get into remission with the colitis, and exercise, diet, lots of like stringent living, had worked really well. So my first pregnancy with my daughter, who's now 10, was really good because the colitis had stayed in remission. I was really fit and active. And life was fairly good, to be honest with you. But after the pregnancy, what happened was it basically triggered like a major flare up. And by the time I fell pregnant with my I've got twins. So by the time I fell pregnant with my twins, I was not in remission, high risk pregnancy because of the colitis and because of the twin aspect. But it was a really rough ride of a pregnancy then, because obviously managing a toddler is crazy. She was 3 at the time, but the impact of my body and how tired I was, and just like all of the effects of the colitis were pretty major. So yeah, so although I've had it since before, like my best period of remission was actually when I had my daughter, first of all.
How did you find that in the differences in the 2 pregnancies?
Major, like almost completely the polar opposite experiences. Like with Caitlin, I was working in London still. I was still in corporate. I was, like I say, fit and active. I was in the gym until I was 8 months pregnant with her, like quite regularly. So I was able to really look after myself, rest when I needed. And so the pregnancy, although I was monitored for the colitis, actually it really didn't impact at all, which was wonderful. So aside from like migraines and sickness in the early days, actually, it was a really good pregnancy. Whereas with the boys, I just felt like I'd been dragged through a hedge backwards permanently, basically. So where I wasn't in remission already with the boys, the colitis was very active. I had to transfer my consultant care from one hospital to another because we'd moved in the middle of it all. And just the battle, first of all, with the new consultant, because the notes weren't very good in terms of the handover. And they're like, oh, you've got this version of it. It's not very bad. I'm like, no, actually, I've got severe like pancolitis. It's really bad. Oh no, it's just a little bit like, so even just that was very draining whilst being pregnant and very stressful. But the pregnancy itself really took a toll on my body. And that's actually where I started to become a lot more unpredictable in terms of like day-to-day life. I was already self-employed by then, so I could manage it a bit better. But I'd be booked in to teach a class and then not be able to go and teach the class because physically like exhausted above and beyond. I mean, twin pregnancy was always going to be harder, but like above and beyond like that natural tiredness. And I really struggled with anemia because of like blood loss from like my condition. So it was just a constant like battle. So we fix the anemia and then that would bring other health issues and we'd have to correct that. So we've kind of felt like the whole pregnancy was all about correcting different side effects of different things for the colitis itself. And then when I had my boys, they came home, but one of them was very sick. So he spent 4 months in hospital and I lived with him in hospital. And my colitis was just raging, like absolutely like out of control. And the medication just didn't cut it at all, like wasn't working. Didn't have that self-care time to sit and rest because I was living in a hospital with him and it was just completely unmanageable, really. Like, but you have to carry on because you've got kids and you've got this situation. So you push through and it ended up being such a critical point that, again, I landed myself in hospital. It was one of the first hospital admissions I'd had. And the stress of having like 3 very small children, 1 sick baby, and battling with my consultants team about how severe this, episode was, very, very draining.
Yeah, I can imagine that must be, well, you've gone through a difficult pregnancy already. Like you said there, it felt like you were having to have all these different things to correct things as they were going wrong. And then your son was really unwell. And I'd imagine that the stress of that probably didn't help.
Not at all. I mean, I do see the impact of like how I carry the stress and everything just compounded in on itself and there was no real route to fix it. And we know with chronic illnesses that there isn't a fix. And the fatigue was just unbearable because you just have no energy, slumped all the time. And living in a hospital for a few months at a time is like that anyway. It has quite a toll on you. So to just constantly try and be positive to like make sure the kids are okay, or it just made me really focus on other things to kind of almost like hide away from it, like just run away. So very often I'd sit in hospital working on my business and just as a distraction really to how ill I was, how sick he was, and that I had other kids at home. So it was a really tough period of time.
Working then while you were going through that really helped kind of give that distraction?
It really did, yeah. So when I was diagnosed with colitis, I just started a new job and it was like dream job, absolutely loved it. There was a lot of travel involved. It was in sport, which I love. And I went and told my manager like what had happened, like what I'd been diagnosed with. And they were fantastic about it. They were really, really good. They let me work flexibly as far as we could, like with client arrangements. But every single time I got a new boss, I kind of found myself explaining like, I might not be very reliable because this, or, I need to work flexibly because of this. And actually, genuinely, they didn't really care too much. They just let me get on with it because I was good at my job. And then while I was on maternity leave, I was overlooked for promotion. I got really angry about it. So I went and found myself a new job and landed myself in not such an understanding environment. It was really high pressure. I had a tiny baby at home because my daughter was very small. And again, the stress of everything, although the colitis was in remission, just a constant juggle. And I ended up actually leaving on long-term stress leave, not going back, and trying to manage kind of what was looking like serious like mental health aspects, but also the colitis and the stress flared because of all of that going on. So I decided not to go back to corporate and bought into a franchise. And people always say, like, I don't know how you do it. Like you get ill and then you carry on. But when you work for yourself, you have to. But it's a different kind of work. And I've really just shaped work to work for me with the illnesses. That's been really, it's been a big motivation point. Like we often talk about like, what's your why in your business? And mine is to have more time with the kids, but more importantly to me, so that I can manage my health aspects, because I very often these days land myself in hospital and then I can, not proudly, but work from hospital if I need to, because they don't need me there physically. So I've kind of constructed work around what fits for me. Like if I've just gone through a really heavy period of fatigue with all the diseases flared up, and I've just worked from my sofa if I can, or just put the laptop down and not worked. So having that aspect and building in a recurring revenue so that if I can't physically work, the money still coming in has saved an awful lot of stress.
Yeah, so it's helped create that balance.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's been so important because, as much as, I can sit and work in hospital if I want to, I generally do because I get bored really easy. It's just like, I think the problem with chronic illness is it's your body, isn't it? Not your mind. So your mind's still like, I'm firing all cylinders, like, come on. And your body's going, no, I'm not moving. I'm not doing this today. So to have a business that allows for that has been so important. Like it really has. And what I find is that if I'm sure everyone with chronic illness feels like this, but like in a period where you're in a flare up and you just feel like you're against the world because you can't do the things that you want to do. And it looks like there's nothing wrong with you. So people are like, oh, she's so lazy, but it's the judgment aspect of it, isn't it? And to be able to still like keep my brain functioning and working and, be able to do that and hide away basically in my front room or in my bed has been really helpful for my mental health, actually. It really has.
Yeah, I think it's good if it's positive for your mental health. And I think you touched on this briefly that there is an element of when you're self-employed, you're the business. So if you're not working, there is that knock-on effect. Do you think that's ever made you feel like perhaps you've done a bit more work than you would have done otherwise and haven't been able to take as much of a break?
Yeah, so I hit a really key point actually last year. So I bought my franchise nearly 10 years ago. And it was a pediatric first aid franchise. So I would go out and I would physically train the classes. And during the pregnancy, what happened was I was so unpredictable with the boys and I'd wake up in the morning just not able to go and do it. So I had trainers that worked for me. I basically took myself out of the physical running of the business and just did the admin and the marketing and built the business up, which worked really well. That was always the plan. But what I found happened was I'd gotten myself into a situation where I had multiple companies. So I had my franchise. I'd built a parents' mental health business based off the back of my own experience and training that I'd gone on to do. I had a corporate kind of training business. I was working as franchise support. So I was chair of the PTA at school and just taken on too much, basically. And I loved everything that I did. And I was just constantly juggling the balls. And I knew I wasn't very productive in any of them, but I loved all of them. Anyway, what happened was I basically, in 2023, hit a point where I had fallen a bit ill, thought not much of it, had a chest infection. And where I'm on immune suppressants, I'm always really careful about, that. So I'd kind of started to slow down a little bit, and that the cough turned into a chest infection, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And before I knew it, I was in bed like 3 days, literally couldn't get out of bed. Like my other half had to work from home and deal with the kids, and like they kept coming up, like, Mummy, why aren't you coming downstairs? Like I physically can't. I just couldn't get out of the bed. It was awful. And I was supposed to be going up to Leeds to do a thing, and just like everything stopped. And that's how I know I'm really bad. And what happened was I went to the GP, and the GP said, I think you've got pneumonia and you need to go to hospital. So I went to hospital, and after quite a long period of time, they confirmed that I had severe pneumonia. And where I had the immune suppressants and my chronic illnesses were all flared up, my immune system was just shot, like completely shot. So we're suppressing the immune system, can't fight the infection, it's turned to pneumonia. And I was very, very sick. I was jaundiced, like properly sick. And so they told me I had to stay in hospital, and I just remember crying, like, I just don't want to do this again. I'm so tired of doing this. And they're like, you have to stay in because we have to give the medication intravenously and we have to get you back on your feet. And he said to me, it's going to take 6 months to recover. And I laughed and I was like, no, like that's crazy amount of time. And he's like, honestly, it's going to take you 6 months. And he was absolutely right, it did. But I woke up in hospital the next morning and I just knew that something had to change. Something had to change because I had run myself into the ground. I wasn't listening to my body. I was trying to do all the things and I was trying to be able, because that's what you're taught, isn't it? That's what society expects of you, rather than recognizing that actually I was not able or not as capable as I felt that I should be, to the pressure that I put on myself. So I woke up in hospital, had this like epiphany and just went, oh, I've got to change everything, like literally everything. And that week, whilst struggling with my breathing, I did continue to work, and I did and I was saying to so I freelanced for somebody for franchise support, and I was like, it's fine. Like I'm happy to work. And I was, but equally I was struggling to breathe and I couldn't sit up by myself. And just the ridiculousness of the situation and how ill I'd gotten and how bad it was, compounded by the fact that I had all these immune suppressants and other things going on. It was just awful. And so I decided I was going to make a change. And I came out of hospital. I shut down most of the businesses, walked away, gave them to people, just completely reorganized. So I was just left with my original franchise, and I started a new company, which sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Like I've shut down everything. But basically what I did was I looked at what my skills are. And my skills are helping other businesses with their growth, and particularly in franchising, because I've got so much franchise experience. And at that point, I'd been turning down like requests to help people. And I was like, actually, if I can turn this into a business and I can use it to build recurring revenue, then I never have to be in this position again where I feel like I have to work. It wasn't like a boss telling me I had to work, but I felt that I had to work. And that's what I did. So I've spent the last kind of just over a year building out a company that allows me to have that freedom of, if I don't feel like I can sit at my desk today and do everything, I don't have to. The money's still going to come in. And there's still like anxiety about letting people down. And it makes me really anxious actually about like booking stuff in, like where I have to go to stuff. But I just kind of got to a point where I was trusting that. And back in July this year, I was really ill for months this year. And I had to let 2 clients down. I couldn't go to 2 conferences. So I lost a lot of money, but I just felt awful letting them down. Again, I was pushing myself to a point where I was like, I'm going to go, I'm just going to do it. Like, I know I'm ill. I'm really fatigued. I'm sleeping a lot during the day, but I'll be all right to get to Newcastle. And I'd gone to a spa day with my friend on like the Monday, and I was due to travel on the Friday. I collapsed at the spa because the fatigue was so bad. My body just couldn't deal with it. And she was like, you cannot go. And again, I'd ended up in hospital. So, and I always feel really defeated when I end up in hospital. And the kids, it's the guilt of the kids, like, because they'll wake up and be like, where's mum? Like, oh, she's at the hospital. She went to A&E last night and now she's not back. And then she's disappeared for like 5 days. And fortunately, they are able to come and visit me. But it's like my kids have gotten used to the fact that sometimes mum's just not around and dad deals with it. Like it's not nice to kind of have that on your brain, but we've just learned to cope with it as a family, I think.
You've touched on something really important there, that guilt element or that feeling of pressure that you should be doing something, and ideas of how productive someone or what productivity should look like, something I struggle with a lot as well. And I was interested to know, how do you kind of broach this topic with your kids? How do you explain your health issues with them?
We're going through a really funny phase at the moment, actually. So like my daughter, who's 10, she has obviously a deeper understanding. My twins are now 7. And so I can sit down with my daughter and say, like, at the moment, I'm not very well. So we just, and she's had so many questions in the last few years that we've sat down and explained, like, I've got these conditions, I'm safe. Because her immediate question is, what's like that finality? Like, no, that's not going to happen. That's okay. But they see me take my medication. I mean, I take like handfuls of pills every day because that's what keeps my body working. So we've been very open about, what we can with her about like, this is what this looks like. This is what it means. She had an event where she was at school and they were talking about somebody with pneumonia while I was in hospital with pneumonia. And unfortunately, that person had died. And she came home terrified. And we had to sit and explain to her, like, no, that's really unusual. That's not what's going on with me. But we're in a funny phase at the moment, as I say, with the boys, because at times you think that they really get it. Like, and we've explained, mum's not, I'm not very well. And sometimes I struggle and sometimes I need more sleep, or sometimes I can't physically go and do stuff that we want to do. And the boys are quite chilled out, to be fair. Like they don't want to be on the go all the time, but there's times where I'm really grumpy with them or really agitated because of the fatigue mainly. And then I'll always be like, I'm really, like the guilt comes back. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to be grumpy with you. It's because I'm really tired. One of my twins has recently turned around and been like, you're just making it up. You're not tired. There's nothing wrong with you. So it's almost like having that society judgment like mirrored back by one of your children, and it's soul destroying. I'm not gonna lie. And it's like, no, it is real, like it is true. But yeah, their perceptions, to see their perceptions around what illness is, because when they're poorly, like they're poorly for a few hours generally, and then they're all right again, or maybe a day, or their tummy hurts, like they don't understand that the deeper level of it all. And I know that in a few years they will. This is like the hard part, but to try and explain to your 7-year-old why you're not going to go to the park today because of this, or you promised that you'd do painting with them and actually just need to put a film on and sit on the sofa is hard. And for me, it's the guilt around the agitation, like how grumpy I am with them because I never mean it. And you kind of want to put it back in and be like, I'm so sorry. And it's a battle. But it's that internal battle of like, it's okay to be grumpy. It's okay to be how you are. But equally, I don't want that to impact my relationship with my kids.
Yeah, and I can imagine like when you said there about your son saying, "Oh, is it real?" I mean, I guess that's something that maybe they've picked up from society, and that really shows that impact. And it's quite, I don't know, I say shocking, but it's not shocking because we hear
It
it
is.
every day. But it's also hard when it's your, must be so hard when it's your child and so young as well that they're already picking up on these ideas from society of what value is and what lazy is, and that kind of link between chronic illness and being lazy, which is often something, I hear it a lot. So that is, yeah, it's quite a stark reminder of how significant impact community, society perceptions have. And from such a young age, they're already starting to take on those values because of, the society we live in. So that must be incredibly difficult to navigate from your own family.
Yeah, it's, I have to just remind myself it's not really personal. It's not really how it's coming out. But obviously in our house, we don't talk about being lazy because fatigue is not lazy. And this is something that we battle a lot with other people and kind of make sure that we kind of set that straight, like myself and my partner, because obviously he has to manage all of this as well. But to try and explain to your kids that sitting around and resting is fine, and as a society, I think we're just, and this is kind of what made me change my whole business approach, because we are just expected to be on the go all the time. We're so overscheduled. We're so quick to be like, hey, look, what's the next thing? I'm like that, like I know I am. And that's part of my drive, but equally, it has to be safe to rest when you need to. And you have to be able to live in an environment where you're comfortable with that. And to have your 7-year-old tell you that you're lazy and you're making up is like, ouch, that really hurts. But it's also an opportunity, I guess, to, as he gets bigger, and his twin brother's a bit less vocal about stuff. He probably has the same thoughts, he's just less vocal. But, with a very articulate 7-year-old who's very perceptive, it's like actually your initial view is not necessarily the right one. So it's a learning opportunity there. But like when he's in a temper and he's firing all guns at you and you're lazy, you abandon us when you're tired, and it's like, yikes, that really is, it's like a knife to the heart. Thanks.
Yeah, it's painful to hear it for you. And I think it's being in that moment, you're saying about the guilt and things, and you have no control over your fatigue. And I think, like you said, it is an amazing teaching opportunity to raise your children to understand that it's okay to rest and the importance of taking time for that, and that it is not lazy. But then you're also, on the flip side, having to kind of battle the perceptions that they may have, like even if they don't mean anything by it, even if it's just internalized society, but that's perceptions they're portraying towards you while you're trying to do that as well. And that must be incredibly painful, like, as you said, very difficult.
Yeah, we had one back in June. Things were a bit crazy. I had a work trip and then I came back and my other half had a trip. And while he was on the trip, I was really struggling with fatigue. And so the kids' kind of perception, like I booked them into clubs and like I booked them into different things, and they were like, "You've abandoned us." Like he literally was like, "You're abandoning us because you don't want us around, and you're lazy. You just," he literally said, "You just want to sleep." I'm like, "Yeah, I need to sleep, and that's okay. And it's not being abandoned. It's you're going to go and have fun somewhere else while I can rest, and then when you come back, I'm going to be a happier person because I've recharged my batteries rather than running on empty all of the time." And this is a real recent thing, like because when they were really small, like when we come home from hospital and they were like 0 to 2, I just tried to do everything. I didn't have the rest. I didn't take that care. I didn't have that self-worth, I guess, to say, well, I need to come first, because I've got 3 small children and I'm a mum and obviously have to put them first, because again, that's what society tells us that we have to do. But now as they've gotten older and I've kind of adjusted to, having multiple chronic illnesses, and I think I just hit a better point of acceptance with it. Like, this is how we live and we have to find the best way to live with it, and try not to carry the guilt of what they feel, but to kind of model that back to them and say, well, It's okay that you think that, but it's not actually the truth. I think it's really important with little ones when you're parenting, because the other thing that actually the chronic illnesses impact from a parenting point of view for me is consistency. We know that kids need and love consistency, but some days I'm really tired and I don't care if you go and get a snack from the cupboard or what it is, and you can have 3 snacks because I'm over it. First is a day where I'm like on it and like, nope, you can't have a snack because I'm going to cook you dinner and and it's so they don't have that same consistency either. And that's been troublesome to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. And like what you're saying there about being that pressure to be like the perfect parent. And I think actually taking that time when you need it, booking them into the club so you'll know they're doing something that they enjoy, something they're going to have a good time and they're going to be safe so that you can rest, so that when you're there, you can be as present as possible. To me, that's the definition of being a good parent.
Thank you. I hope Finn sees it that way one day.
Yeah, they'll look back in future and they'll realise.
Yeah.
When they've all started their own franchises.
Exactly that. Yeah, they're busy business owners with kids themselves, so they'll look back and say, yes, mum was right.
Well, we are coming to the end now. I know that franchising has been a massive thing for you in terms of managing your balance of chronic illness. So I was wondering if there's anything you would recommend for anyone listening right now who's thinking about franchising and looking at this as a more sustainable income. What would you recommend? Is there any, I guess it's kind of a big question for like, what would you recommend? But is there anything you'd recommend what's that first step?
I think the first step is recognizing that what you're doing now isn't working. Like for me, the first step in franchising was realizing that corporate wasn't working and wasn't going to work for various reasons. And I think once you've worked that out, then having the confidence, I think part of it's confidence and part of it's acceptance to know that there is another way. So if you're struggling with your illness or anything in life really, but like illness in the context, like if you are struggling to work and maintain a traditional job, there's a fear there, of course, with finances and things like that, but please know that there is another way. Okay. And what franchising did for me with the illness and the mental health aspect was it opened up a world that let me construct what worked for me. So if you're at that point or you're getting to that point, what I would say is do your research on what kind of franchise might suit you. So I went from like corporate sports marketing into teaching pediatric first aid. And they're so polar opposite, but this is what franchising allows for. It allows you to go and basically retrain with support in an environment that's going to look after you, but you're the boss. So you're going to work around you and your commitments and what you are able to do. So I would say if you're looking at changing, that is a really safe change to make. Do your research, figure out what might work for you and your family if you've got one, and talk to different people about their experiences. Equally, if you're running a business, so this is the other kind of side of what I do, if you're running a business and you're finding it really hard because you love your business, but it's a bit too much with the illness and you feel like you're, I think we just go through phases in life, don't we, where that chronic illness is really bad at times. And sometimes it can be the stress that kind of, I don't believe stress triggers them all, but I do think it doesn't help. So if you've got this business and you don't want to let go of it, I walked away from mine, but if you don't want to let go of it, then franchising is actually a good option, because to be able to franchise what you've already built means that you're passing over the growth and the delivery to other people who will come and invest in you and your business. So you become that kind of train the trainer kind of parent figure in the relationship, where you teach them how to do it, they go do it, they make the money, and it builds you a recurring revenue because you will earn money from them in a really happy and collaborative way. So I would say franchising is a good option, whether you're looking to buy a franchise and get out of what you're doing, or if you've already been entrepreneurial, found yourself with chronic illnesses and struggling, and are looking at, how do I either save the business or scale the business without burning out, basically, because I think that's our fear, isn't it, with chronic illness? Like, I can't be too busy because I'm going to burn out and I'm going to be in hospital. So yeah, 2 good options there. But if you're looking at franchising and you want any advice or you've got any questions, then please look me up, because I'm always happy to have a chat and point you in the right direction.
Amazing, thank you. And I will pop your links in the description so anyone who wants to get in touch can do so. But yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's been really good.
That was the amazing franchise specialist, Stacey Cann. To learn more about her work, please check out the links in the description. Be sure to follow to keep up to date on all the latest episodes. And as always, thank you for listening.